The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom launched in May 2023 to unimaginable hype. As the direct sequel to 2017's Breath of the Wild, regarded by many to have revolutionized open-world game design and be one of the greatest video games ever created, some were doubtful that Nintendo could achieve these same heights again. But not only did Nintendo achieve these same heights, they surpassed them, with Tears of the Kingdom launching to abundant critical acclaim. Reusing many of the same assets, the items, and the map of Hyrule from Breath of the Wild, and controlling in the same manner, it seemed obvious to most that Tears of the Kingdom was the superior game. It was the same, but more, and better. It featured 2 additional worlds to explore in the sky and the depths, adding caves and wells, and more shrines across Hyrule, adding in more NPCs, side quests, and content sprinkled across the land. And perhaps best of all, showcasing an unfathomably well-designed physics engine that allows players to construct an assortment of machines and other creations, subject only to the player's own creativity. But as time went on, an interesting phenomenon started to emerge from the darkest depths of the internet. Some trolls were having the audacity to suggest that they actually preferred Breath of the Wild over Tears of the Kingdom. As we've progressed into 2024, this sentiment has only strengthened, leaving many Tears of the Kingdom fans flabbergasted. When presented with any pushback, often these Breath of the Wild enthusiasts will quickly retreat, offering some vanilla explanation such as,
"Well, I guess it's just that Breath of the Wild launched first and so was more revolutionary."
Or,
"I played Breath of the Wild so much that I didn't have the drive to explore all of Hyrule looking for 6 million Korok seeds again."
Or,
"I grew up with Breath of the Wild. My childhood was wonderful. Blah blah blah."
What is unfortunate here is that there actually are valid reasons to prefer Breath of the Wild over Tears of the Kingdom. Not just because it came first, but in a vacuum, playing both games side by side for the first time in 2024, and these valid reasons are all too often not being highlighted. I'm going to use actual science today to highlight for you the real reasons why many prefer Breath of the Wild over Tears of the Kingdom. Let me get this out of the way at the start. I love both of these games, and I don't actually have a strong preference for one game over the other. This video is not intended to bash Tears of the Kingdom. It is a magnificent game, worthy of much of the praise it has received. But it did occur to me when playing through that there are some things that Breath of the Wild actually did better. I'm going to share these things with you purely for entertainment purposes. Feel free to leave me a comment and let me know where you agree or disagree, but don't get yourself riled up. This is just for fun. I will be focusing on just my top 3 reasons for Breath of the Wild being the preferable game, which I believe are the least subjective reasons and easiest to defend using actual science, as long as you consider psychology to be a science. I'll be leaving out minor gripes or more subjective preferences, such as the story, the dungeon design, the bosses, the shrine quality, etc. Without further ado, let's examine reason number 1, which I call triangle rule violation. Okay, let's start off with the basics. What is the triangle rule? In 2017, Nintendo developers Fujibayashi Hidehiro and Makoto Unezu gave a rare glimpse into some of the thinking that drove the design of Breath of the Wild's world. In particular, they talked through their extensive use of triangular shapes in the design of Hyrule, and how a triangle serves 2 purposes. First, it presents an option as to whether you go around the triangle or straight over the top. Second, it conceals what lays ahead on the horizon, leaving a desire to explore and be surprised by what is on the other side. In general, a triangle fits into one of 3 size categories, the biggest category being things such as mountains, big enough to be a visual marker in the landscape, the middle category being things such as large hills, still big enough to obstruct the player's view, and the smallest category being things like large rocks, mostly just for a change of pace while traversing the environment. This shot shows just how extensively triangles were used in the land design, as well as rectangles, which also serve to obstruct the player's view. This sequence of images shows how this comes together in practice. First, a rocky hill obstructs your view of whatever is on the horizon. As Link goes around this hill, a structure comes into view, and as Link continues to move, it becomes clear that there is a tower beyond the structure. The triangle rule was a key part of what made the exploration of Hyrule so satisfying in Breath of the Wild. It aided player freedom in giving multiple methods to pass obstacles in the landscape, and kept up the sense of wonder by concealing what lay just beyond on the horizon. At this point, you may be asking why this is an argument in favor of Breath of the Wild, when Tears of the Kingdom reuses the exact same map of Hyrule, triangles and all. Well, the problem arises from the move to the sky in Tears of the Kingdom. Simply put, from an aerial vantage point, almost all triangles are blips in the terrain and can fully be seen over. Tears of the Kingdom doesn't force you to explore from the sky, but it does heavily push you in that direction. At the same moment early on in the game when you obtain the paraglider and are told to explore Hyrule's regional phenomena, you also blast off from Lookout Landing's Skyview Tower. This is a wonderful and fun experience, and almost certainly you will notice multiple shrines surrounding you. Naturally, you will mark these shrines on your map and use your tower blast-off to directly drop in on each of these shrines, one at a time. Seeing the power of flight, and understanding you can reach even more distant landmarks easily as well by obtaining more stamina, you'll likely trade in your Light of Blessings for more stamina. This process tends to repeat as you can now reach more distant shrines and more distant Skyview towers, and then even the regional phenomena locations, all while barely having covered any ground by foot or on horseback. At least this is how my first playthrough of the game went. Not everyone will approach the game the same way I did, of course, and the game does not force you to bypass massive amounts of Hyrule by flying in the sky, but a good number of people will do just as I did, and the reason why is explained by the principle of least effort. Simply put, when given multiple paths to achieving a goal, human beings will naturally choose the path that minimizes effort expenditure, and aerial travel does exactly that in Tears of the Kingdom. The most egregious example of aerial travel ruining the exploration of Hyrule during my first playthrough occurred when setting off to explore the Goron regional phenomenon. I reached the Elden Canyon Skyview Tower on my way to Goron City and took back to the sky, but got so consumed by flying to shrines I spotted that I actually ended up in Zora's Domain, not Goron City. This certainly never happened to me in Breath of the Wild, accidentally reaching an unintended divine beast. But it was no issue as I fast traveled back to Elden Canyon and flew off again in the direction of Goron City. Here, I spotted a shrine on the upper slopes of Death Mountain and determined I had enough stamina to fly over to it and climb up to it. Having activated the shrine ruined much of the remaining Goron quest, as I was able to fly from there directly down to the flashing yellow dot on my map in Goron City. Here I learned that I must make my way to Yunobo-ko headquarters, and I am even told by Bluto that it is in a pain-in-the-neck location. Well, not for me, because my aerial pursuits unlock the shrine on top of Death Mountain, so I warp there and fly directly to Yunobo-ko headquarters. After restoring Yunobo to his normal state and agreeing that we need to head up Death Mountain to look for Zelda, I see this text bubble from Yunobo indicating that I should build some sort of cart contraption to ascend the mountain. But there's simply no need, as I warp back to the shrine and am instantly at the top of the mountain with Yunobo. I would go on to complete the entire Goron regional phenomenon, while more or less not taking a single footstep to see what the region has to offer. And therein lies the problem. The map of Hyrule was painstakingly designed according to the triangle rule to maximize satisfaction while exploring on the ground. The power given by Tears of the Kingdom to take to the skies largely trivializes the entire ground map, as nearly the whole game can be completed by lazily floating to points of interest. And although the game does not force you to air travel, the principle of least effort suggests that many players will gravitate to this approach while unintentionally undermining their satisfaction from exploration. Let's move on to reason number 2, which I call the paradox of more. Many proponents of Tears of the Kingdom reference the sheer amount of content packed into the game. More shrines, more NPCs, more side quests, the addition of wells and caves, and most importantly, 2 entirely new maps, the Sky and the Depths, in addition to the existing map of Hyrule. It is truly a staggering amount of content to be packed into a single game, so much so that some report feeling overwhelmed by the endless number of things to do. But for the sake of this argument, let's even give the benefit of the doubt and assume that most players are not feeling overwhelmed. What then is the problem? The problem isn't that the additional content is low quality. Although it's true that the Sky Islands feel a bit sparsely utilized, and many of the designs are repetitive and uninspiring, they are still usually fun to explore, with their own mini-boss battles and interesting shrine puzzles. The Depths have received some criticism for having very little of interest within them despite being a positively massive area. Although there is some validity to this, they are still an eerily interesting place to explore and progress through. So if the newly added maps in Tears of the Kingdom are well designed and deliver some fun, even if not quite as well designed or fun as the base map of Hyrule, then what is the problem? This is where we get into the paradox of more, or as it is commonly called in other circles, the presenter's paradox. What psychologists have found is that when evaluating the strength of a set of items, it is human nature to average out the strength of all the items instead of summing the strength of all the items. This paradox can be applied to many situations. Here are some examples. When gifting an expensive bottle of wine, the gift receiver will perceive the gift to be of higher monetary value if the wine is the sole gift, as opposed to if the wine is accompanied by cheap plastic cups, even though obviously, the gift costs more when it includes the cups. When interviewing for a job, the interviewer will not be as impressed if the interviewee, after mentioning their stellar performance at their last company, also mentions their tenure at the local improv club. When creating a YouTube video about why one game is preferable to another, The creator will persuade more people by covering perhaps just their 3 strongest points, instead of listing every minor point imaginable. Basically, the presenter's paradox is just the psychology of the old saying, less is more. And this is the problem with much of Tears of the Kingdom's new content. In particular, the sky and the depths maps. It's not that this content is of low quality or is devoid of any fun. It is just that it does not achieve the same bar for quality and fun that the base map of Hyrule does. This lowers the average fun experience per moment of gameplay, and even though this content achieves a positive fun value, what it actually does is lower the perceived fun level of the game in the mind of the player. And now we've arrived at reason number 3, which I call lack of mastery. No discussion of Tears of the Kingdom would be complete without analyzing the new Ultra Hand ability. Truly a marvel of engineering by Nintendo's developers, this ability allows players to connect together all sorts of different objects they find throughout the open world. Crates, logs, rocks, boards, wheels, fans, rockets, and flame emitters, just to barely scratch the surface, are a few of the things you can connect in any way imaginable, and see your creation fluidly interact with the world, all governed by the game's sophisticated physics engine. There is even an entirely new system based around powering these creations. Collect Zonite and refine it into either a Zonite charge or a crystallized charge, with the former replenishing your energy cell and the latter expanding the capacity of your energy cell. The creations some players have come up with are nothing short of mind-blowing. Flying fan bikes, rock-climbing tanks, shock-emitting transport trucks, giant robots that move into enemy camps and obliterate them with lasers. It feels as though just about anything is possible. It's a remarkable amount of freedom to be given in a video game. I knew much of this prior to my first playthrough of Tears of the Kingdom, and to be honest, I found it a bit intimidating. Despite having an engineering background, I wasn't sure I had the imagination to come up with creative designs, nor the desire to complete advanced engineering projects in my downtime. As I gradually progressed into the game, I actually felt some relief that the game never required advanced uses of Ultra Hand. On the initial Sky Islands, you'd have to do things like connect a couple planks together to make a bridge, or attach a fan to a board to make a raft. But these were all small, simple projects and usually obvious, as the required pieces would be sitting right beside the obstacle you need to get past. As I reached Hyrule, I started to almost never need Ultra Hand. When I encountered my first construction material site, I attempted, and failed, to build a car, but then quickly deemed that this was a waste of my time, and then reverted to running to my destination, and shortly thereafter, flying to my destinations. I progressed through most of the game, rarely having used Ultra Hand for much more than trivial or obvious tasks. I ignored the Zonite system entirely and wasn't even sure how it worked, until one puzzle late in my playthrough, where I was flying a Korok to his friend and needed to use a few Zonite charges to keep my fans powered. Granted, the game does occasionally require the use of Ultra Hand in a non-trivial way, often to complete a shrine puzzle. The Construct Factory later in the game makes good use of Ultra Hand too, but all too often, Ultra Hand felt like an afterthought. A ridiculously powerful sandboxy ability that would only ever be well utilized by the most hardcore and dedicated of players. So why is it a bad thing to have Ultra Hand's full abilities at your disposal even if you just make limited use of them? Simply put, it leads to a reduced sense of mastery. Mastery, or the perception of competence, is one of the 3 key pillars of motivation established by author Daniel Pink. But despite knowing the awesome potential of Ultra Hand, the game never gave me a compelling reason to advance my building skills. This is less satisfying than, say, a game that compels you to master its core mechanics. There were almost always alternate ways to accomplish tasks that felt easier or less tedious, whether that was riding a fallen block back into the sky with recall, or cheesing solutions to shrines with an Ultra Hand plus recall combination. Again, I understand these were my choices and it is possible to pursue more advanced solutions during the game, but I argue that the principle of least effort will lead a large number of players into taking the easier solutions to puzzles when available. For a couple of reasons, it's evident that Nintendo knew there'd be some resistance to fully embracing Ultra Hand. First, auto-build is clearly an attempt to band-aid the tedium of constructing the same creations over and over again, and this is effective for things you have built before. My one complaint though is that the game does not more heavily guide you to obtain auto-build early on, or require it early on like the other abilities. Personally, I obtained auto-build right before the end of the game. Second, the inclusion of schema stones, which allow you to auto-build preset recipes, is evidence that Nintendo thought these creations would be useful, but doubted that the majority of players would have the drive or ability to build these creations on their own. Despite my argument, I am actually glad that Nintendo included the full Ultra Hand ability, as, for me, the super imaginative inventions it allows for outweighs the negative effects from a lack of mastery. But nonetheless, this is still a valid reason why many players might find themselves preferring Breath of the Wild. Here, the abilities were simpler and easier to gain a sense of mastery around, leading to greater satisfaction. And to make this clear, there is nothing inherently wrong with a game mechanic that is difficult to master. The problem arises when a game mechanic is difficult to master, and the game does not adequately compel you to improve at said mechanic. Okay, that completes my argument for why many people may legitimately prefer Breath of the Wild over Tears of the Kingdom. To reiterate once more, I think they are both fantastic games, and I don't have a clear preference between the two. Do you agree or disagree with me? Respectfully let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss what I have coming next. Bye for now.